Welcome to today's topic. I'm really excited for today's video. For those of you who are new to following me, new to listening to me, my name is Heather McConaughey and I'm a intuitive eating counselor. I'm also a registered nurse. I was a registered nurse for 6.5 years. I have a bachelor's of science in nursing, and I'm also an intuitive eating counselor. I was a weight loss coach for 5 years before transitioning to being an intuitive eating counselor. And this video today, this topic today is all about really teaching you on the court one of the strategies and techniques that you can use immediately. You can start today with this to help you transform some of those foods that you are overeating and that you are feeling out of control with, okay? So one of the things when we are overeating a food and we feel out of control with a food and we feel addicted to a food, what's actually going on is that food is not habituated to us. So what does habituation mean? Well, habituation is kind of like what it sounds like. It has the word habit in there. Habit meaning something we do over and over again. And getting habituated to a food means you've had so much exposure to it over and over again that it's just not that exciting to you. It's kind of just neutral. Think about a food that you don't overeat, right? Like I never binge eat egg whites, okay? But I eat egg whites multiple times a week. It's a food that I haven't gotten sick of, but it's also not a food that I overeat and binge on. It's what we call a neutral food. And the reason that you are overeating foods like chips and brownies and chicken tenders and queso is because those foods are actually not habituated for you. Now, you may be like, Heather, I eat those foods a lot. And you might eat them fairly frequently, but I promise you they're not habituated because you will not overeat or binge eat a food that's truly, truly habituated for you. So let's talk a little bit about, how we get into that and how we start to habituate foods. The first thing you want to get and remember is that anytime we're overeating and then restricting a food, that comes from dieting mentality. That comes from worshiping the thin ideal and trying to change our bodies or shrink our bodies so they're smaller. And so then we restrict foods. And when we restrict foods in an attempt to change our body shape, what the response eventually is a binge or an overeating. Yes? Does that make sense? And so when we restrict foods, what happens is we don't habituate them. Habituation is low on the foods that you restrict. Someone put that in the comments for me, shout it from the rooftops. Habituation is low on the foods that you restrict. I'm going to give you an example from my life. So I discovered that when I ate less sugar in general, I was able to either lose weight or maintain my thin body, okay? But this is what happens long term when you do those behaviors. You might be able to do that for 3 months, 6 months, a year, whatever. But long term, what starts to happen is that food becomes so low on your habituation list. Like you have zero habituation with a food that you never eat or you've forbidden. So what happened for me is I had zero habituation when it came to sugar. So then what was happening is I was binge and overeating sugar. So a food that you restrict will eventually become a food that is not habituated. And when something is not habituated, you will eventually overeat and binge it and feel out of control, and the cycle repeats itself, okay? So one of the things you have to get to make this change, you have to be, first of all, you have to recognize that restriction is not working for you. You might feel like it's working for you because maybe it's producing results that you wanted to see in your body, but long term, it's going to backfire on you and it's going to affect your mental and emotional health. I think that's a huge thing that nobody talks about with dieting. And to be honest, I didn't really fully understand it either when I started working as a weight loss coach. I just was this is working. I'm getting results. People are getting results. This is awesome. But the longer you do something, the more you see the effect of it. And I started to see there's actually mental and emotional consequences to this behavior of restriction. One of which is overeating, binge eating, which creates feelings of despair, anxiety, regret, etc. So the first thing you have to do is recognize that, restriction is not working for you. If you are having episodes of overeating and binge eating, you have to get that restriction is not working for you. You are probably experiencing suffering. You're probably experiencing anxiety. You're probably experiencing food obsession and not able to stop thinking about foods. And you're probably engaged in either overeating episodes or binge episodes. And if you want to know more about like the difference between over and eating and binge, I can create something on that. Just let me know. But in general, the nuances of the definition are less important than the experience you have of being out of control around a food and feeling bad about yourself because you've lost control around this food. Okay, so how do we do habituation? This is where I want you to get your notepad, take some notes. You're going to want to know these details because it's a really cool process. The first thing that I want you to do, your first piece of homework, I want you to make a list of all of the foods not all the foods. You can do all the foods, but at least 10 foods. Make a list of at least 10 foods that you don't allow yourself to eat anymore. Okay? So somebody in the comments, can you just write 10 foods that you don't allow yourself to eat so everyone else can see that? So make a list of 10 foods that you do not allow yourself to eat currently. So if I was doing this exercise, from a year ago, I would include, pizza, sugar. I had even eliminated hummus. That's how restrictive I had gotten, y'all. Okay, it had gotten weird up in here. That's what happens long term, y'all. It seems good at first, and then it gets weird the longer you do it. Okay, so make a list of 10 foods that you don't allow yourself to eat. The next thing I want you to do is I want you to rank them in order from least scary to most scary. So when I first started habituating foods, I had to do this and I had to make a list. My list was very long. It was like dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of foods that I no longer let myself eat, y'all. It was actually really sad. Like, I cried about it, and my inner child cried. Like, she felt super deprived. Like, sometimes she wanted a hot dog and mac and cheese, and like, forbidden. Okay, so I want you to rank those foods from least scary to most scary. What that looked like on my list was, I think peanut butter and jelly sandwiches were the very first food that I habituated, and not like the healthy version with like whole wheat bread and no sugar jam, the chia seed jam, and no, like, we're talking like Jif peanut butter, Smucker's jam, white bread, that kind of peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So I think that was actually the first food I put on my list. And my scariest food was just cookie dough. Straight out of the bowl, cookie dough. Okay, that was my scariest food. The food I felt the least amount of control with. It felt just terrifying to give myself permission to eat cookie dough. Okay, so does that make sense? So you have a list of the 10 foods that you don't allow yourself to eat. Then you rank them in order from least scary to most scary. Now, if you're doing this by yourself, I recommend starting with your least scary food. I recommend not throwing yourself into the deep end by yourself without a life preserver, because habituation can actually be really scary. It can trigger a ton of anxiety. It can trigger a lot of negative emotions and feelings, which is why I was working with a coach while I went through this, and why I do recommend you work with a coach to go through this, because you can know how to do something, but the actual walking through the process and doing it can be very challenging emotionally. So I recommend you pick your least scary food to do this on your own to start with, okay? If you want to tell me what your food is, you can. You can send me a message here on Instagram, put it in the comments, tell me the food that you're going to pick. Mine was peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Okay. Here's the next step that you need to do. And you could go to a restaurant to do this as well. Like, for example, if you feel out of control with like Chick-fil-A, I habituated Chick-fil-A chicken sandwiches. It took me a couple months to habituate them. And like now I honestly like, they're just like whatevs. Like I barely even think about them, but they're there if I want one. Like sometimes I might get one. You could do a restaurant item as well. You're just going to have time in your life to go there every day, to get it. So I think it's easier to do a food that you can do at home. You're going to buy the food. You're going to buy enough food to always have enough of it in your cupboard to eat. And if you run out, you have to buy more. So what that looked like for me with peanut butter and jelly sandwiches is I bought a big loaf of white bread, I bought a jar of peanut butter, jar of jam, and started eating, okay? You also have unconditional permission to eat as much of this food as you want, which sounds scary. But you're going to listen to your body, and if you eat past fullness a little bit, it's not the end of the world. Really check in with yourself and be like, do I want this food right now? So the first day that I habituated peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, I had 2 in that day. And they were like slathered with peanut butter and jelly. And like, I was like, wow, this is the best thing I've ever eaten. Like my mouth exploded. I wanted another one in the evening. And so I let myself have another peanut butter and jelly sandwich in the evening. So that's what unconditional permission looks like. I didn't eat it on top of other meals. I really like sensed my hunger and I was like, okay, I'm hungry now. What do I want? And it was like, it wasn't salmon and Brussels sprouts. It was another peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So I had another peanut butter and jelly sandwich in the evening. The next day I woke up and guess what? I wanted a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So I had one that day. But that day I only had one. I actually didn't want a second one. The next day, I wanted another peanut butter and jelly sandwich, so I had one. That happened for about 4, 5, maybe 6 days, and then all of a sudden, I was done. I didn't need another peanut butter and jelly sandwich. If I wanted one, I could have it. I actually had something with peanut butter and jelly maybe a few weeks after that, and I couldn't even finish it, y'all. This is the power of habituation. I was like, oh my gosh, this is life-changing. So you're going to pick a food and then keep as much of it in your house as you need to stay stocked. So I didn't actually run out of that food, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, when I was making them. Like I had leftover bread and stuff by the time I'd habituated it. But if I had eaten through all that bread and peanut butter and jelly, I would have needed to go to the store and get more. Do not let it go empty in your cupboard, because that feeling of scarcity can create deprivation, which can trigger a binge and lessen habituation. A couple of other things that will really help you habituate a food is to eat with no distractions. So if you're watching TV, playing on your phone, reading a book, even talking to people, driving, working, sitting at your computer, all those things can delay habituation. So if you want to do it as efficiently and quickly and strongly as possible, then you want to make sure that you're just eating fully present and engaged with the food. You could have a little background music going on in the background, that's fine, but otherwise fully engaged. Also, another thing that will delay habituation is variety. So, for example, if you wanted to habituate ice cream, you would pick the flavor that you most wanted, that you feel the most out of control around. Me, it's like, mine was vanilla soft serve, okay? Like, love some vanilla soft serve with chocolate sprinkles. And you're just gonna pick that one flavor and that same brand. If you vary the brand or the flavor while you're habituating a food, it can delay habituation because you're introducing variety and novelty. Does that make sense? So you're going to only habituate one food at a time. Make sure you pick the food that's your least scary to start, especially if you're doing this by yourself. Buy enough of it to always have enough in your house. I feel like I'm doing like the Girl Scout motto, Boy Scout motto with my hands right now. And you're going to give yourself unconditional permission to eat as much of it as you want while being mindful and not distracted and not introducing variety. You'll know that you've successfully habituated a food because it will go forgotten in your fridge, your freezer, your pantry. It might go stale and you have to throw it out. You might forget about it in the back of your freezer and it gets freezer burn. These things have happened to all foods that I've habituated. Now, remember, the goal is not to burn out on a food. The goal is not to hate a food by the end of this. I still like peanut butter and jelly, but I will tell you this, it just is very neutral to me. It's the same as eating some salad and salmon. It's the same as eating cottage cheese and strawberries for me. It's the same as snacking on watermelon, feta salad. Like, it's just whatevs. And that's the goal of habituation. The food no longer consumes your mental energy. You do not feel obsessed about it. It gets neutralized. All right? It's like baking soda. It just neutralizes the food for you. Okay, so remember, the goal is not to get sick of the food, it's to neutralize the food. And when you practice habituation, you will stop overeating, you'll stop obsessing, you will have a much healthier relationship with food, you'll enjoy food again, and you will start to have peace with body and food. Now, this is just one of the techniques out of the 10 principles of intuitive eating, and it's not even a principle. Habituation is a technique inside a principle, but I wanted to give you the nuggets and the gold of how to start implementing this now. If you have questions on habituation after listening to this, then send me a message on Instagram, post a comment, and I will do my best to answer it. But I really hope this was helpful to you today. I hope you enjoyed it. If it was, share this topic with somebody else. Send this to somebody else who also struggles with overeating and binge eating. And let's just like empower each other to move past this really negative mindset that hurts us. Okay, thanks so much for watching, and I will talk to you soon.